They didn't yell, they didn't argue. She just reached over and ripped my boarding pass in half, in one smooth motion like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. "Stay here, Olivia," she said. "This trip is for family." And then she turned her back. My sister. While my parents looked on and said absolutely nothing. People stared. The ticket agent froze. I stood there holding half a piece of paper and a lifetime of silence. She didn't just ruin a vacation. She humiliated me, erased me. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some ignored middle child with a cold stare. 5 minutes later, the entire flight was canceled, and the person who made the call was me. When I walked out of the airport's secure command room in full NSA uniform and ordered the flight carrying my entire family to be grounded. That was the moment her eyes changed, because suddenly she didn't just hate me, she feared me. My name is Olivia Harper. I protect this country from people like the ones they never even see. But sometimes, the hardest threat to face is the one sitting next to you at the family table. Before I share what really happened, if you're here, if you're listening, drop a simple hi, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far my story can reach. And if this story moves you, please consider subscribing. Your support is how voices like mine get heard. Thank you. Now, let me tell you everything. We were standing beneath the massive departure screen at LAX, my entire family buzzing with vacation anticipation, snapping photos in front of the Hawaiian Airlines sign. I stood a little apart, hands buried in my jacket pockets, wondering if this trip, this rare family vacation, might finally be a chance to repair what had long been broken between me and Emily. That hope lasted maybe 10 minutes. My name is Olivia Harper. I'm 32, single, and a counterterrorism specialist for the NSA. Most of my life is sealed under layers of classification and silence. Family gatherings don't mesh well with Black Ops briefings, so I stopped trying to explain myself years ago. The cost. A chasm between me and the people I once called home, especially Emily. She's 35, a high-powered attorney, and the family's golden child. While I was in a basement in Prague intercepting terror plots, she was being celebrated for making partner at her firm and planning a 6-tier wedding I couldn't attend. I missed it due to a critical mission. She's never forgiven me. Today was supposed to be neutral ground and olive branch, but I should have known better. As I stepped forward at the check-in counter, passport and ticket in hand, I felt her eyes on me. I didn't turn, but I knew that look. And just as I was about to hand my boarding pass to the agent, Emily's hand shot forward, snatched it from my grip, and held it up in the air. "You don't belong on this trip, Olivia," she said loud enough for nearby travelers to look up. "You're not family. You never show up for anyone but yourself." Before I could respond, she tore the ticket in half right there in front of Mom, Dad, and Ethan, our 18-year-old brother, whose jaw dropped in disbelief. Mom didn't say a word. Dad just sighed like he'd seen this coming. Ethan started to protest, but Emily's sharp glare cut him off. I felt like I'd been punched. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because a small, stupid part of me had hoped this trip meant something different. I didn't lash out. I didn't yell. I just stood there watching them walk away, dragging their luggage toward security. That's when I heard it, 3 sharp beeps from the concealed earpiece in my tote bag. I turned slightly away from the crowd and fished it out. A voice came through, low and coded. "Priority alert. Potential threat identified, flight AA237. Confirm immediate contact with FAA." My heart stopped. AA237 was their flight, the one Emily just kicked me off of. I paused only a second longer before turning away from the check-in desk and heading straight for the secured operations wing. Whatever had just happened between me and my family, it had to wait. Something far bigger had just been set into motion. I flashed my badge at the first checkpoint. The guard didn't even ask questions. My access level took care of that. Within minutes, I was in the operations center staring at a live manifest of Flight AA237, my family's flight. Passenger flagged, one of the analysts said, nodding toward the screen. Unconfirmed intel from a vetted informant suggests a potential operative from Shadowvale may be on board. That name sent a chill down my spine. Shadowvale wasn't just any extremist cell. They were precise, methodical, and impossible to track. I'd been on their trail for 6 months. So far, nothing but dead ends. And now, one of them might be 15 rows away from my parents. From Ethan. I didn't hesitate. Shut it down. Immediate halt. Contact FAA. Delay the flight. Don't let that plane leave the ground. The coordinator paused. You sure pull the gate, I said. Now. 3 minutes later, the airport PA system crackled to life. Attention flight AA237 to Honolulu has been delayed due to a security review. All passengers please follow the instructions of airport staff. Meanwhile, on the monitors, I saw the gate hold lights flicker red. The boarding bridge froze. And then just seconds later, I saw her. Emily. She was halfway down the jetway with Mom and Dad in tow when she turned around. Her face was pale with confusion until she saw me. Standing behind the glass in a black NSA-issued jacket, headset clipped, watching everything. She pushed through the crowd and stormed toward the glass wall separating me from the terminal. You did this, didn't you? She hissed, the moment she was close enough to be heard. You're ruining the trip for everyone just to get back at me. I stared at her for a long beat. There's a credible terrorist threat on this flight, Emily. You think I care about your tantrums? Her expression faltered. The silence between us said more than any shouting match ever could. Back in the ops room, TSA and security were sweeping the plane. I coordinated from behind the monitors, instructing agents in real time. We flagged one man almost immediately, early 40s solo traveler, fake business class ticket, and agitated when asked to produce a second form of ID. His bag was unusually heavy. When scanned, it revealed hidden compartments lined with unregistered electronic components. One technician called me over holding up a small device with dual frequencies. Remote detonation capable, he said quietly. Likely part of a larger mechanism. My stomach dropped. The man was detained, calm, almost smug. But when facial recognition kicked in, the air in the ops room changed. I recognized him, not personally but from an op in the Philippines last year. He'd appeared in grainy surveillance footage leaving the scene of a bombing that killed 12 civilians, including a child who died in my arms. We never had a name, just a face. Until now. And he'd been sitting 2 rows from my mother. Security confirmed the threat. The device was neutralized before assembly. There were no injuries. The flight was canceled and all passengers were ushered to rebooking counters, many unaware of just how narrowly they had avoided disaster. But none of that mattered when I walked back into the terminal and saw Ethan sprinting toward me. You saved us, he said, his voice cracking. Olivia, you seriously saved us. My parents followed, both visibly shaken. My father retired. Air Force looked at me like he hadn't really seen me in years. You did good. Liv, he said, voice hoarse. Real good. Emily stood back, arms crossed. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes were no longer furious. They were afraid. I had become something she didn't recognize. Something she couldn't belittle anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own family. I felt like the only one who knew what the hell I was doing. They moved us into a private VIP lounge while TSA and NSA completed their sweep of the flight. Most passengers had no idea how close they'd come to catastrophe, but my family knew. For the first time in what felt like forever, we were all seated in one room, not on vacation, not for a celebration, but because something in the shadows had nearly touched our lives. No one spoke. The silence pressed against us like humidity, thick and suffocating. Emily sat rigid in the corner, eyes fixed on a random point on the far wall. She didn't glance my way once. My mother sat next to her, arms crossed, mouth drawn tight in disapproval. Only Ethan broke the posture of resistance. He had scooted his chair beside mine and kept looking at me, his expression open, curious, almost proud. I didn't know what to say. I was trained to lead missions, not manage emotional debris. Then my father cleared his throat. He stood up slowly, as though he needed time to steady his thoughts, and walked over to where I sat. "You're really with the NSA?" he asked quietly, as if saying it too loud might break the spell that held the family in such fragile silence. I nodded once. His hand came down on my shoulder, firm, not ceremonial. "Real. I always thought you were distant, that you didn't care. But today, I saw who you are, what you do, and why." Something caught in my throat. I nodded again, but this time my chest felt heavy in a different way, like years of weight had just shifted slightly off my back. "Jesus!" Liv, Ethan said, half laughing, half in awe. "I always thought you were just some IT genius with security clearances. I didn't think you actually stopped bombs and stuff." I smiled, really smiled for the first time that day. "I do a little more than reset passwords." Ethan shook his head like he was relearning everything he knew about me. But then his expression changed. His brows drew together, his voice dropping slightly. "Hey, there's something else I should probably tell you." I turned toward him, sensing a shift in tone. Right before the airport, he said I overheard Emily on the phone. She was talking to someone I don't know who, but she said, and I quote, "I can't stand Olivia. She always has to be right. She needs to be taught a lesson in being left behind." The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded. My stomach turned, not out of surprise but out of confirmation. Emily hadn't just acted out of impulse. She had planned to humiliate me, calculated it. Emily stiffened from across the room. She had clearly heard what Ethan said. Her face lost a shade of color. Her mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, then closed again. For the first time in all these years, she looked unsure of herself. She didn't deny it. She just lowered her head, eyes blinking rapidly. My mother broke the moment. Her voice was cold. "You can save the world, Olivia. But if you can't keep your family together, what's the point?" I turned to her slowly. I felt no heat in my voice, only exhaustion. "You keep asking me to choose between two things I never saw as enemies. But if I have to choose, I will always pick protecting people, even if those people never see it." She said nothing more. Ethan looked back and forth between all of us and muttered, "Well, this vacation's off to a weird start," and still no one laughed. Our rescheduled flight departed 3 hours later. The airline had upgraded us all to business class as an apology, not knowing how close we'd come to disaster. The plane was quiet aside from the hum of the engines and occasional clinks of drinkware. We didn't talk much. Emily sat near the window, earbuds in. My mother buried herself in a crossword puzzle she barely touched. My father seemed stuck in thought, eyes staring at nothing. Ethan occasionally glanced at me and tried to smile, but even he was subdued. Everyone seemed relieved the crisis had passed. Except me. I couldn't relax. My head was still spinning with the details of the operation. The man on the plane, the device, the face I recognized from that mission in the Philippines. And worst of all, the way Emily had looked at me, part fear, part regret, part something else. We landed in Maui just before sunset. The sky was painted in oranges and pinks, the ocean catching every color like it was made of liquid glass. Our resort was stunning: white sand, palm-lined paths, gentle waves. It should have felt like paradise. Instead, it felt like surveillance. At dinner that evening, the restaurant was dim and elegant, soft jazz playing in the background. I had barely touched my grilled fish when Emily suddenly raised her glass. "Let's toast," she said, her voice carefully measured, "to making it here without any more disruptions." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The dig wasn't subtle. No one responded. Ethan looked at her, then at me, then focused on his plate. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. My mother gave a soft approving nod as if to say, "Finally someone said it." I felt a pulse of anger behind my ribs, but swallowed it down. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Later that night, I stepped out onto the open terrace overlooking the beach. I needed air. That's when I saw it. Emily's phone sitting face up on a lounge chair beside the pool. She must have walked away briefly. A new message blinked across the top of her screen. She hadn't locked it. I didn't want to look. But my instincts overrode my morals. I leaned down just enough to read it. "She doesn't suspect. I'll keep her distracted. Let me know when it's clear." My chest tightened. The number was encrypted untraceable without serious effort. But I recognized the pattern. I'd seen similar hashes in previous NSA surveillance cases tied to foreign networks. My mind raced. What was this? Was Emily being manipulated, used, or was she knowingly involved? I stepped back, snapped a mental image of the number, then walked away as quietly as I came. That night, I sent a secure request through the NSA network for a pattern match and priority analysis. By the time morning came, I received the response, and I wish I hadn't. The message originated from a node linked to an operative alias that had appeared in Shadow Veil Communications, someone they called Spectre. My breath caught when I read the final line of the memo. "Subject Spectre may be aware of Agent Harper's involvement at LAX. Threat likelihood elevated. Potential retaliation target immediate family." I felt the earth shift beneath my feet. If they knew who I was, what I did, they wouldn't strike at me directly. They would find someone close, someone who didn't see it coming. I sprang into action. I upgraded our hotel room's security settings. I moved my parents and Ethan to a higher floor. I changed the lock protocols. I contacted the local NSA field office in Honolulu and requested discreet surveillance on the resort's perimeter. But when I proposed adjusting our itinerary, cutting short the beach plans, skipping group events, Emily exploded. "Are you serious?" she snapped in the middle of the breakfast buffet. "You're going to ruin this trip too. Can't you just be a normal person for once?" My mother backed her. "Olivia, not everything is life or death. Maybe just let your family enjoy something for once." I felt alone in a room full of people with my blood. I stared down at my coffee, gripping the mug to keep my hands steady. No one here understood what I was trying to protect them from, not because they were incapable, but because they refused to see the world as it was. And deep inside, I feared I was already too late. The next day, the resort organized a beachside barbecue for the guests. Long tables were set out beneath swaying palms. Flames danced beneath sizzling meats, and music floated above the soft hush of waves. Children ran barefoot across the sand. Parents clinked glasses. It was the kind of scene meant for postcards and picture frames. But I couldn't relax. My eyes never stopped moving. I scanned the crowd, the parked vehicles behind the beach path, the servers walking between tables. My instincts weren't letting me rest. I stood with a paper plate in my hand and a stomach that wouldn't accept a bite. Ethan was tossing a frisbee with a couple of teenagers he'd met that morning. He was laughing. For a second, I let myself feel glad he still had the capacity to laugh. Emily passed behind me, drink in hand, her tone dry as she muttered, "Maybe try eating like a normal human just once on this trip." I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to spar. I turned my gaze toward Ethan again. That's when it happened. A black van pulled up behind the trees at the edge of the sand, so smooth and quiet that it almost escaped notice. The side door slid open. 3 men in dark clothes and masks bolted from the vehicle with military precision. I was already moving, but they were faster. They reached Ethan before anyone registered what was happening. One stunned him with a shock baton. Another clamped a hand over his mouth. The third grabbed his legs. They heaved him into the van. I screamed his name, ran as fast as my legs would take me. Sand clung to my boots, slowing me down by seconds that I didn't have. By the time I reached the spot where he'd been, the van was already turning onto the road, tires kicking up dust and salt spray as it vanished. People screamed behind me. Resort staff ran in confusion. Guests clutched their children. My mother collapsed to her knees on the sand, howling like an animal. My father stood frozen, fists clenched, face pale. Emily just stared at me. Then she turned fire in her eyes and shouted, "I told you this is your fault. He was fine until you brought all this here." I ignored her. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my emergency communicator, and hit the red key. The line went straight to NSA's Honolulu Response Unit. Code red. Family member abducted. Confirming target by Shadow Vale. Repeat live abduction at Maui Resort. Request full asset deployment. I gave coordinates, license plate, if possible vehicle description, timestamps. But even as the protocols kicked into gear, I couldn't stop the sound playing over and over in my head, Ethan screaming my name as he disappeared into the van. Guilt washed through me deep and cold. I had known something was coming. I had seen the signs. And I had failed. 4 hours passed without contact. I sat alone in the security room of the resort, replaying camera angles, tracking heat signatures, trying to find any clue. Then my phone pinged. It was an encrypted signal through an NSA-secured line. The source was marked anonymous, but verified as authentic. Attached was a video file. I didn't wait. I pressed play. Ethan was tied to a metal chair in a concrete room. His face was bruised. His lips were cracked. But his eyes met the camera with a fire I recognized. "Don't stop," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Don't give up." A shadow moved behind him. Then a voice filtered through distortion filled the room. "You interfered. That was your first mistake. Now your choice is simple. Stop digging, walk away, or your brother never sees the sun again." The screen went black. I sat motionless for nearly a minute, my heart barely beating. When I finally stood, I opened the NSA tablet in front of me and pulled up the internal record linked to Emily's encrypted messages. The previous week, she had received communications from a masked number, now confirmed as a low-level courier within the same operational grid we'd linked to Shadow Vale. And the more I stared at it, the more the pieces no longer fit like coincidence. I didn't want to believe it. But I had to ask myself, was she just careless? Or had she played a part in setting this up? I returned to my hotel room that night, feeling like I had aged a decade. I sat on the floor and stared at an old photo of me and Ethan taken on his 12th birthday. We were covered in cake frosting and laughter. I had forgotten how young he looked then, how much hope was in his smile. I pressed my forehead to the photo. I made a promise. I would bring him home, even if I had to burn down the entire world to do it. 3 days passed. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. Every lead was a dead end. Every trace of digital activity went cold seconds after we pinged it. The NSA's local team worked around the clock, and I never left the command post unless forced. But nothing surfaced. Ethan was still missing, and the clock was ticking. By the 4th day, I felt my body begin to fold in on itself, but I wouldn't stop. I combed through every file I had ever collected on Shadow Vale, routed past operations, shell corporations, burner accounts, courier patterns. I started seeing patterns that weren't there. That night, just before dawn, I received a ping from a number I hadn't seen in 5 years. Jake Carter. He had been my partner once back when I was still wet behind the ears and learning how to navigate the underworld of global threats. He left the bureau after Cairo. I always thought it broke him. Turns out he never really left the game. His message was short. No emotion, no preamble. Heard what happened. Meet me. I have something. Coordinates attached. I didn't ask questions. I went. The rendezvous was a crumbling chapel on the edge of the island, overgrown with vines, roof half caved in. Jake was already there, leaning against a pillar with a coffee in hand, like we were just two old friends meeting up. He handed me a flash drive without a word. Inside was a transaction map, wire transfers and crypto shifts, so buried in false companies and ghost IPs that even the NSA hadn't seen them. But they were all real, and they all pointed to a property in Los Angeles. A warehouse one I had never flagged before. Jake sipped his coffee. Your boy was there. Not anymore. But there were signs. I asked how he knew. He didn't answer. But he looked tired in a way that told me he had done things he couldn't unsee to get that information. Whatever this is, he said, you can't do it alone, and you don't have to. I brought the data back to headquarters. We analyzed it for hours. Buried in the logs was something worse than I expected. The transfers originated from inside NSA's own network. A deleted account, high-level clearance, authenticated under a false name that had once belonged to a man we all thought dead. Spectre. He hadn't just infiltrated Shadow Vale, he had built it from within us. He knew everything about how we responded, how we tracked, how we investigated. Every protocol I thought I could rely on he had helped write. And he had taken Ethan. I didn't wait for orders. I sent a full data packet to the NSA's command center in DC and requested immediate mobilization for a black-level mission. I packed my gear. I went to my mother and father's room to say goodbye. My father met my eyes, said nothing, just nodded once. My mother stared at me. If you don't bring him back, she said, don't come back either. I didn't flinch, I didn't reply. I turned around, left the hotel, and boarded the next flight to Los Angeles. My hands trembled for the first 20 minutes. Then they stopped, because I knew exactly what had to be done. The warehouse was exactly where the encrypted files said it would be, on the edge of Los Angeles, tucked between a scrapyard and an abandoned freeway exit, guarded by rust and time. From the outside it looked like nothing. From the inside, it could have been the heart of a war. Jake and I arrived just after midnight. We wore civilian gear, no NSA identifiers. Officially, we weren't there. A mobile command unit waited 3 blocks away, radio silent. I had clearance to act, but only if the operation remained invisible. The plan was simple: in plant audio and thermal sensors confirm usage of the site. Get out. No direct engagement unless discovery forced our hand. We were ghosts. We had to stay that way. We slipped in through a gap in the fence and scaled the wall along the west side. A ventilation panel had been loosened. It wasn't subtle, which worried me. Either someone was careless or they wanted us to think they were. Inside, the air was heavy with motor oil and metal. Stacks of crates lined the walls, some labeled as auto parts, others unmarked. We moved in silence. I counted 3 overhead cameras, all dead or fake. Jake took the east side, I moved north. That's when I saw it. A scrap of fabric jammed beneath the edge of a metal support beam. I pulled it free. It was torn stiff with dried blood, navy blue, exactly the color of the shirt Ethan had been wearing the day he was taken. I pressed it to my lips for a second before folding it into my pocket. Behind the crate stack, I found a narrow steel door. No lock, no light, just a cold draft drifting out from the cracks. I looked back at Jake. He nodded. I opened the door. A staircase led downward into a sub-level that reeked of sweat and something chemical. There were signs of recent occupation, footprints in the dust, an overturned cot, a plastic water bottle still half full. On the wall was a length of frayed rope and scuff marks along the floor. Whoever had been held here was restrained. Ethan had been here. We didn't get time to search further. A clatter behind us, then footsteps. We ducked back behind the crates, just as 2 armed men entered from the far wall. They were speaking Spanish, but I caught enough. They were checking sensors. Someone had triggered a silent alert. One of them moved toward our position. Jake and I locked eyes. We had no choice. The first man dropped before he could raise his weapon. Jake's shot hit clean. The second spun and fired. I ducked left, returned fire, and caught him in the thigh. He collapsed, guns skittering across the floor. Then the alarm started. Red lights spun across the warehouse ceiling. I heard shouts, the distant slam of metal doors opening. Our window was gone. We scrambled out the back, taking the long route around the loading bays. Sirens hadn't reached us yet, but they would. I checked the body of the first man we had taken down, hoping for something, anything. His phone was still warm in his hand. The screen glowed with a conversation thread, one line still visible. Package en route to Malibu. Priority Alpha. Secure. My stomach turned. I knew that address. Or rather, I knew what it used to be. A cliffside mansion purchased under a fake name long scrubbed from property records. NSA once suspected it was a foreign asset safe house, but the investigation was shut down without explanation. Now it was their final stronghold. I contacted HQ. Subject has moved. Target is Malibu property. I'm requesting full operational control and rapid team insertion. 10-minute lead time. The reply came instantly. Green light confirmed. Jake looked at me covered in dust and blood, breathing hard. You ready for this? He asked. I nodded once, calm and sure. I was made for this day. The estate perched on the cliffs like a vulture, sleek and modern, with glass walls and solar arrays glinting under the moonlight. From a distance it looked like luxury. Up close it felt like a bunker. The kind of place built to be defended. I led a 6-person strike team, each member hand-picked. Tactical gear, suppressed rifles, recon drones already circling above. The air was tense. Every breath felt measured, every movement calibrated. The estate had one front entrance, 2 underground tunnels, and a helipad tucked into the bluff side. We split into 3 groups, entry flanking extraction. I went in first. The main floor was silent. Art on the walls, polished floors, a bowl of fruit still fresh in the kitchen, but there was no life. Not until I reached the basement stairs. There, in a room beneath the house under concrete and steel, I found him. Ethan was strapped to a chair, gaunt and pale, eyes barely open. But he looked at me, and when he saw my face, he whispered, "I knew you'd come." I cut the restraints, held his face in my hands. His pulse was weak, but steady. He was alive. Footsteps echoed from the far hall. I stood and turned, and there he was, Raymond Keller. My former superior, the man who trained me, who once told me I had the instincts of a predator and the soul of a protector, who vanished 2 years ago after being reassigned. He held a pistol low in his hand, not raised, not trembling. "You're not surprised," he said. "No," I answered. "I didn't betray the country," he said. "I betrayed the illusion of it. You, of all people, should understand that. We gave our lives to an idea that never saw us." I kept my stance centered. "You built a terror network. You kidnapped a child." He smiled. "He wasn't the target. You were. And you walked right in." I didn't give him another second. I dropped into a crouch, rolled left as he raised the weapon and fired once, striking his shoulder. The gun flew from his hand. He staggered back against the wall. I walked forward slowly, rifle steady. "You always thought I'd take your place," he said, voice wet with blood. "You were my legacy." I stopped over him. "I am your legacy," I said. "And I chose the right side." He didn't speak again. He was taken alive. NSA command swept in behind us, clearing the rooms, confiscating drives, uploading files. The mansion was flooded with flashlights and agents. In the server room, I pulled one final file. It was a log of communications, one line repeated across encrypted channels. The number matched Emily's. I stared at the screen. My mind raced. I hadn't asked the question. I didn't want the answer. Ethan leaned against me as we made our way to the extraction point. A chopper hovered above the cliff blades, slicing through the dawn sky. As we lifted off, I looked down at the estate growing smaller beneath us. So clean, so quiet, so full of everything I no longer wanted to carry. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The moment Raymond Keller was taken into custody, the operation moved into overdrive. Teams swept through the Malibu estate with precision, collecting hard drives, weapon schematics, encrypted blueprints, and traces of tactical planning scattered across a digital minefield. Each drive we recovered painted a clearer picture of what Shadow Vale had been preparing: coordinated attacks on the national electric grid, a breach attempt on a bioweapons facility in Arizona, and blueprints for backdoor infiltration into high-level government communication systems. It wasn't a movement, It was a war. Quiet, invisible, and on the edge of execution. The NSA's Joint Task Force partnered with the FBI. Within 72 hours, 14 confirmed members of the Inner Circle were apprehended. 2 of them were embedded in senior levels of infrastructure oversight. One of them had held a minor seat on an advisory council to the Homeland Security Secretary. They had been building something massive. We had broken it just in time. Ethan and I were flown directly to NSA headquarters in Washington, D.C., under a secure escort. He was taken to a trauma unit for immediate evaluation. His vitals were weak, his body undernourished, his mind scarred. I was brought before the Federal Security Council for debriefing. They stood in silence as I laid out the operation, the decisions I had made, the protocols I had broken, the risks I had taken. When I finished, they thanked me. They called me the reason a national crisis had been averted. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. The kind of hollow that came not from losing, but from surviving something that demanded too much. Days passed. Ethan began to speak again. Only short sentences. Only to me. One afternoon, as I waited outside his therapy room, I saw Emily walking down the hospital corridor. She paused at the glass wall, then turned and sat in a waiting chair at the end of the hallway alone. I walked toward her. She didn't look up. I sat across from her and placed a thin folder on the table between us. Inside were logs pulled from Keller's computers. Messages, encrypted, time-stamped, sent directly to her phone. She opened the folder, read a few lines, then closed it. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I didn't know who they were. I was offered money to delay someone's boarding. That's all I was told. I thought it was petty corporate sabotage. Not this." I looked at her steady. "How much were you paid to endanger your own brother?" She didn't answer. Her chin trembled, and then she broke. Tears spilled without sound. Her hands covered her face. "I was tired," she whispered. "Tired of always being second to you. You weren't even here half the time, and yet everyone waited for you. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted someone to finally see me." There was a time I might have raised my voice, might have slapped the table and walked away, but not anymore. I looked at her for a long time before I said, "I'm not asking for your apology, and I don't want your guilt. Just stop hurting people to feel visible, that's all." She nodded without lifting her eyes. I stood to leave. Later that week, my mother came to my apartment. No announcement, no calls. Just appeared holding a paper bag with still warm soup and an expression I couldn't read. She sat on the couch and looked at me. "You saved Ethan," she said softly. "And I need to say, I haven't been fair to you." I sat down beside her. "What do you want from me now?" I asked. She didn't answer with words. She just reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were thinner than I remembered, but they held tight, like they didn't plan on letting go again. And in that stillness, something inside me began to settle. I filed for extended leave, something I'd never done in 12 years of federal service. No mission, no surveillance, no encrypted briefings, just time. I took Ethan home. Not to the apartment, but to the house we grew up in, the one on the hill overlooking Los Angeles, where the breeze smelled of sun-dried oak and every crack in the porch told a story. Jake came too. He brought tools, groceries, and the quiet calm of someone who'd seen more war than he ever wanted to admit. He never asked for details. Just showed up, took a paintbrush, and began fixing what needed to be fixed. Ethan started therapy immediately. He flinched when car alarms went off. He froze if anyone raised their voice. But each night I sat by his bed while he slept. Each morning I walked with him to the edge of the property, where the world felt safer with space between it and him. He didn't need a hero. He needed a sister. And for the first time in my life, I learned how to be one. Emily left the city. She didn't say goodbye, but she mailed a letter. In it, she wrote, "I don't know if I'll ever understand you, but I finally understand what I did. I won't let it define me. I've stepped away from the firm, I need time. Time to become someone who doesn't need to hurt others to feel real. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with Ethan's old comic books. Then I got another message, this time from the NSA. They wanted me back. They offered a command position for a newly formed internal threat division, full autonomy, my choice of team, a blank check to rebuild what had been broken from within. I stared at the offer for a long time. Then I replied with one line. I haven't left the fight. I'm just learning how to be human before I return to being a weapon. A few days later, Ethan asked to go for a hike. We climbed the ridge behind our house, the one that curved over the valley and ended in a wide stretch of boulders. The view from the top swept across the entire city. Lights shimmered across the hills like constellations spilled from the sky. He sat beside me, legs swinging over the edge. Are you still scared? He asked. I didn't lie. Yes, I said, but I'm not running anymore. I'll be right here. He nodded and leaned his shoulder against mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were both home. And as the city lit up below us, I understood something I never had before. Victory isn't taking down an enemy. It's not medals, not debriefs, not headlines that say you saved the country. Victory is being able to look into your little brother's eyes and know he still believes in you. And that no matter what comes next is enough. Sometimes the people who try to break us only reveal what was unshakable all along. Strength isn't loud, it's quiet, steady, and often misunderstood. And healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means standing tall, even when no one claps. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment, hit subscribe, and let others find their strength too. Your voice matters here. Thank you for listening.